In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the construction tools that we can use in a BIM technology software program like Revit. Let's go ahead and start a brand new drawing this time using the architectural template. So click on New and then Architectural Template. In some releases of Revit, that's going to be the default template. Let's go ahead and pick OK. We're going to be in the level 1, which is the default, and we'll create a floor slab. So we'll go to Floor Architectural in the Architecture tab. And now, based on the first couple of assignments, you'll see that we're in the sketch mode. And you can tell we're in sketch mode with the X and the green check mark, and everything's kind of grayed out. But at the top, you'll see some color. So we're going to use the generic 12-inch for now. And I'm going to, in the draw panel here, pick rectangle. I'll just click a point, pull my mouse across, and click another point. Now, if you're concerned about this, the span direction, the direction of the structure itself, look for those two purple lines here. We can then pick here span direction and pick the shorter end, so that these lines are showing that the structure is going to be vertical here. I'm going to go ahead and pick the green check mark. So going to the 3D view, we can go up to the top and click on the little house icon to see our floor. Now this is one big slab, right? So we might want to divide it up into different pours and be able to calculate when we get to schedules the size or the cubic yards and the cost of that material. So we can select that slab. We can then go to the create panel here and pick create parts. We should see now an icon called divide parts. If I click on divide parts, I can then sketch or go into this edit sketch mode so that I can divide the slab into different pours. So I can go ahead and pick edit sketch and just create these lines that represent the different pours. Here's another one here. Let's just say, I know these are big, but this is as an example. So this is where the concrete's going to be cut through. I'm going to go ahead and pick the green check mark, and then I'm out of the sketch for where I want the joints, and then I'll pick the green check mark again, and now you'll see that this floor has been separated or divided into different pours. Let's go to the level 1 view. So double click here on level 1. And we'll take a look at adding a wall and some of the layers of the walls. So we'll pick in the architectural tab wall, and we'll use a wall that has a lot of different components. So maybe the exterior brick on metal stud. And then up the top, we can decide on the height of the wall. So we'll keep this at the top left as height. We'll change the unconnected to level 2 so that the wall goes from level 1 to level 2. And also we want to change the location line. We want it to be drawn at the finished face exterior, right there. So by doing that, if I click here at the top left and I pull my mouse to the right, you can see that the wall on the finished face exterior is going to be the outside wall. Now look at what happens when I go clockwise. I'm going along the top of that wall, but if I go counterclockwise, it pushes the wall outside. So you want to be careful when you're drawing that you're drawing on the right side of the wall. So click at the top left corner, pull your mouse over and click. And then you can either escape with your escape key or pick the modify button here at the top left to get out of the command. Notice that the wall is made up of several components, but you can't see them because at the bottom left corner, we're on the detail level called coarse. The white box there at the bottom left corner, we can change that from coarse to fine. And when we do that, you can zoom up and see that Fine will show you the detail level that represents those different layers in the wall. And now let's take a look at that wall. You can click right on the wall itself and pick Edit Type over in Properties, and then where it says Structure, pick the Edit button. Notice that there's an exterior side and there's an interior side. I just want to show you that there are several layers that make up that wall, and each one has a different function. You have finishes, you have airspace, and membranes, and substrates, and the structure itself, which is metal stud. And then you have the material and the thickness, and wraps are kind of how they wrap around, how the material wraps around at the openings. If you click at the bottom left corner on Preview, you'll see the preview of the different components or different layers of that wall. You can even change this preview from a floor plan here at the bottom left to a section. Click inside that view and use your zoom commands to get closer to see the different layers. When you highlight the different layers in the dialog box here, you'll see them highlighted in the view. You could insert layers, delete them, or move them up and down to create your own. Just wanted to show you this so that you can get an idea that you do have different layers. Plus, if you wanted to, for instance, bring the brick down further, you could pick the Modify button, highlight this brick bottom part, see that little lock icon, and unlock it so that that material can be dragged down further than the other materials once you place it. I'll go ahead and pick OK and OK again. When we go to the 3D view, and we can double click over here in the project browser, I can hold my shift key and the wheel of my mouse to orbit, or use this full navigation wheel to orbit and take a look at this wall. You'll see the brick on the outside, and if I click on that wall, you'll be able to see that there are more arrows here because I can pull that brick finish down by clicking on this little arrow right here and dragging it down. Just that material, because I unlocked it, will come down further than the structure. Okay, just wanted to show you several different tools in this video so that you're not creating an entire project, but as a construction manager, you would know how to use the software. We can select here this wall and go to the Create panel and pick Create Parts. When you pick Create Parts, you're creating separate parts for this wall instead of it being all one piece that's recognized as a design tool. We want to break it up so that we can look at the plywood and the brick and the drywall. And so now you can see that there are different layers, and when you put your pointer across it, now you can see the different components. It wasn't like that before. Before it was all one piece. So we used that tool called Create Parts in the Modify tab. We selected the wall and then we picked it. So by doing that, now when we click on this individual piece of material, if you wanted to show it in represented in a presentation, Over in the properties panel, you can put a check mark in show shape handles right there and pick apply. And now you have all of these little triangular shape handles. You can pull this material back and here down a little bit so that you can kind of piece that out. And if you want to take a look at how it really looks in a realistic view, at the bottom left corner, we're going to click on this 3D little white icon and pick realistic. That way, if you give it a chance to load, you'll see the material, you'll see the brick, and you'll see the plywood. So again, I'm going to go ahead and click on this material here. You can put a check mark in show shape handles and start to pull this back and down. And in fact, that's the airspace. So when it's selected, you can look in properties, it'll tell you the material. So I'm going to click off that, and you see it's kind of like transparent. So you can click here this plywood sheathing material and see here in the properties palette that it is material plywood sheathing. And that makes a difference when we start to do schedules and work with material takeoffs in quantities. So we'll put a check mark and show shape handles and then pull this material back. So you can see that we can create kind of a presentation detail to show the different layers of material. This is the metal stud. We'll select it, put a check mark and shape handle and pick apply. Use these arrows to pull it back, and then you'll be able to see here the drywall in the background, or gypsum wall board is what it's called here. If you select it and look in the properties, you'll be able to see it. We'll go back to the hidden line view at the bottom left corner. Click on where we changed it to realistic and pick hidden line. And let's take a look at creating a 2x4 stud wall. They do have full add-on packages that will create these systems instantly, but Revit does have a structural tab right here. And in the structural tab, we have a beam system. The beam system will let you create a sketch, and in that sketch include all of whatever beam or structural member you'd like to use. So it could be 2x6 wood stud walls, or 2x10 floors, or even the W-shaped beams. So in the 3D view, let's start by drawing just a regular architectural wall, and then we'll put 2x6 studs in it. So in the architecture tab, click on wall and change in properties here in the drop down, change it to generic 6-inch. And now we already have it as a height up to level 2. We're using the finished face exterior. So I'm going to click here at the bottom left, pull my mouse over and click at the top here for placing that one wall. I'll use the modify button or your escape key to cancel out. So here's our wall, and now we need to load the 2x6 dimensional wood lumber. So hopefully your software has this family. I may have to post it in case your program loaded without those imperial families. I'll go to insert at the top and pick load family. In this Imperial English folder, you have all of these different families, which are external files that you can bring into your drawing or get from Revit City. And what we want to look for here is the structural framing. We can double click on the folder called structural framing, and you have all these different materials like steel frame. We would like wood, so double click on wood. And there are several different types of wood like timber, or LVLs, laminated veneer lumber, and glulam beams, but we're going to double click on dimensional lumber. And now in this list of dimensional lumber, we can highlight the different 2x that we'd like, or you can see that there are different sizes. If you hold your control key down, you can highlight 2x6 and maybe pick up 2x10s, whatever you need. We'll also, let's go ahead and get the 2x4s just in case we use them. I'll pick OK. And now I'm ready to create my system. If I didn't load those, the default would be a W-shaped beam, steel beam, so we need to load the wood to use it. We'll go to the Structure tab, and in the Structure tab, we're going to pick Beam System. Now the thing about the beam system is that it's a closed shape that's going to be filled with whatever structural member you'd like, and also spacing that you'd like. So what we need to do is to set a work plane, because by default the work plane is the floor itself, but we want to make the work plane the side of the wall. So I'm going to pick set, and then I'll pick a plane. See, the work plane is typically at level 1, but I'd like to temporarily change the work plane by picking a plane. So I'll pick in front of pick a plane and pick OK. And now it's this front face or inside face of this wall I'm going to select as my plane. And I can even pick the show button here in the work plane panel to show that now I have my work plane set up against that wall. Now I'm creating a closed shape for my beam system. I can use the rectangle tool in the draw panel right here, and look in properties, make sure that the beam type right here is dimensional lumber, and let's change it to 2x6. And then the fixed spacing, we could change that to 2 feet. You can just type in 2 because Revit will recognize 2 as feet. I'm going to go ahead and pick apply. And because we're using this rectangle tool, I'm going to click here at the top or bottom corner of my wall, pull your mouse over to the bottom corner, so I'm creating a rectangle up against this wall that we created. And now beam direction is important here because these 2 purple lines are telling me that the beams are going to run horizontally and I need them to run vertically. So I'm going to click on beam direction right here and then click on the shorter purple line so that my studs will come in vertically. And now I can go ahead and pick the green check mark, and I have my studs placed inside this wall. If you want to see the studs, you can either turn off the wall display, or what we can do is change the transparency. That's always a good one. So I'm going to click in space here to get all that color off my ribbon. At the bottom left corner where we were able to change it to realistic, we're going to click on that little white 3D box there and then pick graphic display options. I like to work with a little bit of transparency so that you can kind of see through the structure without it being completely wireframe. So I'll just pull this bar over a little bit and pick apply, and so you can kind of see through the wall. And if I go even further and pick apply, you'll see that you can see through the wall a lot more there. I'm going to go head back a little more so that I can still see through it but be able to understand the structure itself. I'll go ahead and pick OK. And now here's the wall with those studs. Now there are a couple of different ways that we can turn off the display of walls. We can type in the letters VG, or it's over here in Properties, Visibility Graphics, and scroll down to the bottom there, Walls, take the check mark out and pick Apply. See the wall disappears right there. I'm going to go ahead and put the check mark back in Walls and pick OK, and there's my wall. Another way that's kind of quicker is to select that wall. Now be careful you're not selecting the structural beam system. You have to kind of get closer to the wall and click on it. And then right click and pick Hide in View Category. Same thing, you're turning off the wall category right there. And what you'll see is that the stud wall is right up against the floor. So if we want to lift it up a little bit so that we can put the bottom plate, we can select it. We can pick Edit Boundary, and we're editing the boundary of the beam system by taking this bottom purple line just up 1.5 inches so that we can put the sole plate underneath. You can even get close enough to hold your left mouse button down on this purple line and drag it up. You see how I'm dragging it up? You're in a sketch mode, so you can actually use the move command, or you can just delete it. We can just delete it. I'll just pick the delete button on the keyboard, and now that bottom line is completely out. If we want to redraw it, we can go ahead and pick the line tool and draw. And I want to make sure that I go up 1.5. We can just draw it at 2 or 3 inches and then move it to where we need it. Just to show you some additional tools here, we can just pull our mouse up, just rest your pointer at the bottom of this purple line, pull your mouse up at even 3 inches, click and move your mouse here over, making sure you're straight in line with the wall. I'll just click there because I know we can clean up these corners. And then once you do that, you'll have these little blue witness lines, temporary dimensions. So I can click right on this 3 inch and type in 1.5 inch. And when I press enter, it goes down and it's drawn 1.5 inches from the bottom. Now I'll use my escape key. I've got a little piece of line there, but a really great tool to work with is in the modify panel. It kind of reminds me of fillet with the radius of 0 in AutoCAD. It's called Trim Extend Corner. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and then I can click on these 2 lines and clean up this corner. Same here. I can click on that little line that we created and the line way over here, so that now I've got the boundary changed to be 1.5 inches up. I'll go ahead and pick the green check mark, and if you orbit by holding your shift key in the wheel of your mouse, you'll see that it's a little bit easier to orbit if you select an object. So if you select one of these dimensional numbers, the 2x6s, and now you hold the shift key in the wheel of your mouse, you see how you can orbit a lot smoother because it uses that object that you selected as a center of rotation instead of some pivot point that's out in your drawing. And if you really take a look, you'll see that all of these have been lifted enough for us to draw that bottom plate. So let's go ahead and put this bottom plate on and pick the beam icon in the structure tab. Make sure you change your properties to 2x6 dimensional lumber, and I'm going to use the defaults to show you how it's placed and then we'll change the settings. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the first here wall stud, and maybe we'll go back a few studs here and see that by default it puts the beam across as though it's recognized as a floor joist or a structural beam. And so we can escape out of that or pick the modify button at the top there, left. Click on that one piece there. I want to show you that you have all of these different tools that you can play around with. I will tell you what to change here so that we can rotate this and put it in place. Right now, if you get close enough, you'll see that the ends are offset by 1.5 inches because the snap to the center of the stud. So we'll change the start level offset to 0 and also the end level offset back to 0. We also need to rotate this, so change the cross section rotation to a -90 for -90 degrees. We want to change, well, let's just see. Let's show you what that looks like, and then we'll change the Y offset value. We'll pick apply, and you see how it kind of rotates based on that -90, and it lines up with the edge of the stud. But now we have to scooch it up in order for it to come up and meet the bottom of this. So you can see that the Y offset shows the bottom plate halfway into the floor. So we can change the Y offset so that it can go up half of 1.5 inches. So it's going to be 0.75 inches. We'll pick apply. If your bottom plate goes back to half of your wall stud, you can see that there are these little arrow grips you can use to pull it closer to lining up to the edge of the stud. There it is. Okay. This video is to show you bits and pieces of the different tools that we can use for construction. Let's take a look at placing a column grid and columns. So we'll go to level 1, and I'm going to randomly throw in a grid pattern. So in the level 1 view at the top right side of really the architecture or the structural tab, there's a tool called grid. And what the grid does is give us those column bubbles. So I can go ahead and click on grid at the top right. I'm going to start here at the bottom left corner. I'm in level 1. I'm going to click, pull my mouse up all the way and click. There's my first bubble. There are ways of creating multiple segments, but I'm just going ahead and create a few more. Just to make this a little bit quicker, I'm just going to go ahead and put one midway. I'll go at the bottom right corner here, come up until the blue line is in line with the bubble head column bubbles, and click. I'll go ahead and create some on the other side too. I'll start at the top left corner and click, pull my mouse over here and click. Maybe I'll throw one in the kind of the middle here and one at the bottom right there. I'll use my escape key to get out of that, and then click right on one of these columns and change that to a letter. If you'd like, sometimes we use numbers and letters for these column bubbles so that we can understand the prints. And then if you go to the structure tab, you can click on column, and one way of placing columns is to place them at the grids, which is typical on a commercial building. I'm going to use some of these defaults. But notice this, that when you place the foundation wall, when you place these columns, instead of using a height, like a wall would go from level 1 to level 2, we're using a depth. And the depth is going to start at the top of the column and go down. So this is going to be a depth of 9 feet, or in other words, it's going to go down -9. So I started the column tool. I'm picking at grids. I'm going to hold my left mouse button down right here at the corner so that I can pull my mouse across all the grids. So all the grids are highlighted, and I'm using a W10 by 49, which I could load other steel shapes and use those also, and pick the green check mark. Here it's only telling me in this level 1 view that I can't see them, because this level 1 view only goes so far down. But they're there. You can go now over to, you can escape out of that and go over to your 3D view, and there are your columns. Now if you want to be able to see those columns in your first level, we can change our view range, and I think that's a good tool to know about. So let's go back to level 1 where we can't see our columns, and in the properties here we'll find view range and pick the edit button, and you'll see that you have a range of how much is shown in this view. So think of the whole model being separated by the top and bottom and cut planes for the different levels. So many people, when working with this view range, will change the view depth level to unlimited, because maybe you just want to see everything underneath level 1. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick unlimited, but you can see that you can decide on where your cut plane is and where your bottom level and your top level are for this view. I'll go ahead and pick apply and pick OK, and now you see we can kind of see our steel shapes. And if you go back to the 3D view, you'll be able to see your column. If you want to create a beam system, you can use either the beam system to place more than one in this whole structure, or you can just click on beam and then pick where you want to start the beam. Make sure you change it from dimensional lumber to W12 or whatever shapes that you want to load in insert and load family, or even here load family. I'll just use the defaults here. And again, there are all these different views, geometric positions that you can change. I'm going to go ahead and click here at the top of the column and here at the top of the column, and you'll see that it will automatically kind of tie into that column. We have several trusses that we can load. Let's go to insert and pick load family and go back up to the English Imperial folder by clicking here on this drop down and going to English Imperial. If you scroll down, you'll see all these different structural connections and columns that you can load. There are gusset plates in here and different columns that you can use, rebar, precast. But what we're going to do is go to structural trusses. So let's go ahead and double click on trusses, and now if you just click on any one of these, you'll see that you have all of these different trusses to work with. I think it might be important for you to, instead of using trusses, let's go back up to English Imperial and use structural framing again. And under structural framing, let's go to steel. When you look at the steel framing, as opposed to the wood lumber that we looked at, dimensional lumber that we looked at, you'll find these bar joists and C-channels that are used in structural design. And so if we use one of these bar joists, we'll just go ahead and use this LH series. I can pick open, and again we have all of these different sizes depending on what you need. I'll just select the top one and pick OK, and then over in the structures tab I can pick beam, and instead of using a truss, as we saw that we have the structural trusses, we're using it like a beam, but we're using the bar joist. And so now here's some place I'll click, pull my mouse over. I know this would be more of a system. I wanted to show it to you that you can place one at a time, or you can create a beam system. And there's your bar joist. I can escape here and take a look at it. So I noticed that the bar joist is running into the flange of the beam, so I can, and it needs to sit on it, so I'll click the bar joist and change the level, start level offset to maybe 5 inches, and then the end level offset to 5 inches. This is important to know because if you need the bar joist to slope slightly for roof draining, you can change the start and the end of the bar joist so that it slopes slightly. I'm going to go ahead and use 5 inches and pick apply and click in space, and you see now it's sitting on the beam. So a couple of things here. If you select the beam, you can pick edit type in properties and take a look at all of the structural properties of that beam. You probably don't want to change too much of this because this is specific to a W12 by 26. When you load other beam sizes, you'll have different structural properties. Also, with that beam highlighted, you can take a look at another tool here called coping, where we can apply a coping to the beams when two beams intersect each other, and you take the web through and kind of cut it so that the flange stops short of the other beam. We can modify the beams so that they connect, and later on I'll show you how to add bolts to this connection in our details. Okay, so this video was meant to give you a little hodgepodge of all the different things we can do in a structural sense in this BIM model.